Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Trade Smart Tuesday. Gotta get an intro for this. Well, one of those countdown timers while you guys hop in. Anyhow, today we're going to be talking a bit about mixed market signals. There's been a lot of mixed signals lately, and if you've been confused by the current market, you're not alone. Let me show you a couple of charts while we have some people hopping in here. We've got a few people in here already. I want to say welcome, everybody. If you're with us, let us know where you're logging in from. If you're one of our members, type into the chat. Let us know that too. This will be some really good and helpful review for you. All right, let's dive into the charts here. So what I've got up is the major indexes, and I'm looking at the major indexes across, well, I'm looking at the 5 major indexes. I like to look at them across time frames, but what we've got here is the daily charts. So what you might notice first, and you know what, well, let's make my face a little bit smaller over here, is that you have the S&P 500 and you have the Nasdaq. Both of them are pushing into new high ground. You have the Russell, you have the NYSE, and you have the Dow Jones just floundering, pretty flat. The Russell's below the 50-day moving average. It keeps on hitting its head around the short-term moving averages. You have the Nasdaq over here. This indicator is the number of stocks making new 52-week highs versus new 52-week lows. You have more stocks making new 52-week lows right now than 52-week highs. The same thing is happening over on the NYSE. And you have some stocks working fantastically and others are not. So if you've been a little confused or if you've been a little frustrated, it's totally understandable why. Now, this isn't meant to be, a session where we all piss and moan with each other. This is meant to be a session where we have some solutions. And so what I want to share with you is my process for outperforming all this. Because if we take a look at some of the stuff that I'm holding right now, NVIDIA, right? And these are all my open positions, right? This isn't some of them. I'm sharing everything with you guys. I've got NVIDIA, Birkenstock, Twist, Meta, CyberArk software, and just picked up SMCI. Now, the thing with each of these is that each one of them is outperforming. Aside from Meta, Meta's the only one that's still trading below its pivot. Everything else is profitable at this point. What I want to share with you isn't that, wow, look at how great I am. What I want to give to you guys is something that you could actually do, right? Because when you place trades could go with you or against you, right? It just so happens that I have a few winners up on the board right now. That's great. What I want to help you do is find these winners for yourself. And so I want to share this process with you. Now, the first thing that I want to share with you is just a general screening process, right? So let's pull up Market Smith over here. Actually, it's Market Surge. And so there's a bunch of screens that I'll run. And what I'll do is I'll build a universe of all of the stocks that are the types that can move up very quickly. All the growth stocks. And I'll put it into this universe list. There's 360 names in here, right? Screening, that's not why you're here, right? Because running a bunch of screens, pre-built screens, that's fairly simple. But the thing that is a lot bigger, and quite frankly, the larger pain in the butt, is managing a variety of lists. And so, what I want to show you as well is a list that I have, a special list of two special lists that I have. I have this list here that's called sector leaders, and I have this other list here, SL. So it's like taking a look at what stocks qualify for this sector leaders, and then which ones are the leaders of said groups. So this is a manual process that I do, and I'll do this once a week. And so I'll go through that whole universe list that we spoke about before, and I will go through it, and I'll see which ones are in the top industry groups, which ones are in rapidly improving industry groups. The reason why I take the time to do that, and you might notice that there's a few annotations on this chart, namely these ones right here that say SL. Every time a stock shows up as a sector leader, I'm manually flagging it on the chart. And I'm doing it on a weekly chart, and it just shows up over here on the daily chart as well. I want to know immediately, every time that I flip through any of these charts, how many times and when a stock has appeared as a sector leader. That's telling me some things about the stock. It's telling me that, hey, the stock wasn't just a leader once, it wasn't just a leader twice. In the case of, say, this one here that I picked up, SMCI, this one has been a sector leader more close to a dozen times in the recent past. So when I am flipping through charts, and if you're someone that flips through charts fairly rapidly, well, type into the chat and let me know if you're somebody that does that too. Like you just like to flip through charts. Am I the only one? Type into the chat. Let me know. Let me know that you're alive out there. So as I'm flipping through these charts, that will show me right away, hey, this one's worth paying attention to. And not only that, when I see it developing a pattern here, right? So here's one that's interesting right now. Maybe it'll be interesting for tomorrow. CMRE. This one is pulled back. It reversed back above the 21, and it could be making a turn over here. So this one would go onto a list, and I would do further analysis on this to see, you know what, is this worth my time and effort to do more work on? And judging by where I would look to enter, right above today's high or right above uh, Friday's high at 1554 versus where I would look to place my stop right below the current weekly low, I would only need to risk about 5%. So that's not telling me that, oh, I'm going to jump into this, but it does tell me that, hey, I want to do more work on this. Anyhow, I'm getting a little bit off topic here. The main idea with all this is that I want to be aware of every time that a stock shows up on the sector leaders list and is showing leadership qualities. Now, what kind of leadership qualities am I looking for? I'm looking for the stock to make a higher weekly high, or I want the relative strength line to be pushing into new high ground. So for this one here, CMRA, you can see how each time it made a new weekly high, it qualified to be on the list. Now, sometimes the group starts to flounder a little bit, and so it may not qualify. Not sure what happened here, but with this making a reversal, closing at its lows, it's starting to lose some of its leadership status, at least for that particular point in time. But that's the part of the power of managing lists in this way, is that you have an immediate perspective on the past history. History is so important. And let me do this bigger here. History is so important when we're thinking about stocks. The reason why history is so important is because, well, it's one of the things that O'Neill talked about. It's one of the things that Minervini talked about. It's one of the things that Darvis talked about. It's one of the things that I talk about, quite frankly. But the history tends to repeat itself in the market. Well, when we're looking at charts, when we're looking at the types of things that cause stocks to move, we could go back in time and see what the biggest winners in history had in common. Worked for O'Neill, worked for Minervini, works for me. And the types of things that they had in common, many of them had great fundamental qualities. So extraordinary earnings, extraordinary sales, high ROE, high growth, those kinds of things. They tend to be in leading groups or groups that are rapidly improving. Thus, why I'm so interested in looking at these sector leaders and tracking them. When we monitor our lists in this way, it lets us it helps us zoom in on the winners. So when well, we have wonky markets, and this is the definition of a wonky market, where you have a couple of indexes pushing into new highs, a couple of indexes floundering around the 50-day moving average, more new lows being made than new highs. It could be a very frustrating kind of market. Here's something else that I want to show you too in relation to monitoring lists. So here's a different list. I like to track everything on my focus on my universe list that happens to be setting up in some kind of a pattern that I want to buy. So, well, what I'll do is I'll go through the whole universe and I'll flip through it and find, well, what's setting up right now. And so these were the ones that happen to be setting up yesterday. That's something else that'll tell me quite a bit about the general market health, how the market is treating the stocks that are setting up. It also gives me some insight into the types of quality of stocks that are setting up too, because everything on my universe list is quality from a fundamental perspective, but are the setups themselves quality, right? Sometimes you get a tell me if you've seen this. There's been stocks that are wide and loose and all over the place. There's other stocks that are nice and tight and controlled. Elf, fairly decent setup. Was a little wider than what I would have liked. I took a pass on that one, but SMCI the other day was great. And here's some other stuff too, right? So some of these names that are on here, you can see that the market didn't treat them that well. So I just want to be in the names that are setting up well and then place orders for the ones that are setting up the best. I want to have an awareness of everything that is setting up in my universe, but I don't want to trade everything that's setting up in my universe, if that makes sense. So, just to recap briefly on some of this here, we spoke about sector leaders and why it's important to monitor sector leaders. These sector leaders have the wind at their back. And if they continue to be sector leaders like this one here, or actually, why don't I go over to some of the trades that I'm in, right? NVIDIA. NVIDIA's been a sector leader so many times. Yeah, you need to take off your socks and shoes to count up how many times it's been a sector leader. But seeing it at a glance, it helps you have an awareness of, oh, this one is a leader. It's confirmed that it's a leader, and it gives you that much more confidence to take action the moment that it sets up and sets up in a high quality pattern. So that's why I'm spending the time to manually track all this stuff. And is it a pain in the butt? It sure is. A lot of this a lot of trading is boring, right? There's a lot of trade management, there's a lot of list management, updating things like this, but it gives the I find that it gives me a very good feel, like a very good tactile feel for what's happening in the market by flipping through these lists. And I want to give a shout out to the guys over at Deep View, because I was speaking with them just the other day. They were telling me that a future feature that they're going to have is automating this part of it, where if I put stocks on a list, that they'll automatically start to track that. And that's a new feature that'll be coming out sometime soon. I'm excited for that. They've given me a free trial with it. I'm just starting to get my feet wet in there. Once I once I dive deeper into it, I'm gonna share everything with you guys, good, bad, indifferent. So really looking forward to that. But yeah, all this list management stuff, it's worth it. It's manual labor. It's boring. But this is the kind of stuff that helped me leave my day job behind and start to build consistency in the market and have something that I could rely on without having to rely on news or gurus or anyone else. Why? Because the charts are literally speaking to us if we allow them to. So let's talk about some practical tips. And by the way, if you guys have questions on any of that, anything that I've said so far, get your questions in. We're going to do Q&A in just a few minutes here. But I want to give you some practical tips for doing all this. So tip number one, we want to be selective. You want to focus on quality over quantity. So if you notice all these stocks that I've got here, right? I've got NVIDIA, right? Sector leader multiple times. BIRK. This is a relatively recent IPO, but this too showed up on the sector leaders list 3 times before finally breaking out. And I bought it right down here. I actually bought it a couple of days ahead of earnings. Why? Because it kept on showing up on the sector leaders list. It was also in a hot group at the time. And so bought it a couple of days ahead of earnings to give it a shot. Right? Some people don't like to buy ahead of earnings. I will buy ahead of earnings if the stock is right. If the stock is setting up properly, if it has plenty of support and it's a couple of days ahead of earnings, I will buy it, because sometimes stocks run ahead of earnings. That's what happened with BIRK. And so I took that risk and it's paid off. TWST. This one was not a sector leader at the time. It hit the sector leaders list a couple of times back here, right? But that's back in February. But what this one did that was special, it had the industry group at its back. Remember, one of the things with sector leaders and why we're interested in them is that if they're in strong industry groups where you have the wind at your back, right? Or industry groups that are highly ranked or rapidly improving, that's one of the things that can push a stock. So when this one pulled back and had this upside reversal here, and let's turn off the annotations for a minute, make it a little bit clearer for you guys. Also turn off the danger signals indicator. When this one had this upside reversal that happened on increased volume, and it also closed at the top of its trading range, that caught my attention. And so I dug a little bit deeper on this one. And one of the things that I noticed on this one, right? Here you're getting a master class here. One of the things that I noticed on this one was that it was tightening up down here on the 30-minute, right around the 21 period moving average. So what's that do? That gives us this really tight compression where we could get in with very little risk. I only took 3.5% risk on this one. This one, so far, it ran. How much did it run? Close to 25%. Yeah, here's Meta. So far, Meta hasn't done that well. It broke out over here. It hasn't stopped me out. I've got my stop down here below the 21 period moving average. But it hasn't been great. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it takes a little bit for some of these names to get going. But that's why we actively manage risk and we keep our risk very small. Still in this one, still in all of these. Yeah, Cyber's another one there that's taken a minute to get going. Finally got above the pivot today, and it's still just kind of inching its way up. And here's SMCI. Well, we spoke about that one already. All those are quality. Do your homework. Track the sector leaders and do it manually. Yes, it is a pain in the butt to do it, but you're doing it once a week. And the more that you do it, start doing it this weekend. If you're consistent with it, it's going to point you to all these leaders. That's how I'm sitting on stocks that are up at 9, 10, 20%, 40%. It's worth it. Be patient and wait for the right setup. Every single one of these, I didn't just hop on it because it happened to be a sector leader. I waited for it to set up properly. I passed on ELF. ELF was another one that's a sector leader, but it wasn't set up quite right for me. Of course, stay disciplined and stick to your strategy. Avoid chasing the noise. So, all that said, get your questions in. One more thing to recap. Let's get into the recap. Recap and then Q&A. Right, so recap. Understanding market discrepancies and focusing on leaders is key. Manually tracking these leaders and waiting for quality setups can significantly improve your trading success. Apply these insights to your trading strategy and see the difference it's going to make. Now, I do want to give you guys something. If you want to have my research or have all this manual labor done for you, all this heavy lifting done for you, you could get a 2-week free trial to Mara Elite Research. I'll post the link in the chat now. And this is a special link that's going to give you that access for 2 weeks. So there it goes. Two weeks free access. Use the link that I just posted in the chat. Any other questions? Get the questions in. We've got a bunch of people watching over on Rumble. Hello to the guys watching over on Rumble. Got a bunch of people watching on X and several people watching over on YouTube. So get the questions in. And by the way, for those of you that are not on our newsletter yet, make sure that you sign up to our newsletter, marrowwealth.com/newsletter. It goes out pretty much every day. It's free. Go grab it. Elad, not sure how you determine the sector leaders. Okay, well, let's recap. So I have this list here, and let's make this list a little bit bigger. 125, 150. And let's turn off the banner so that way my face and your question aren't in the middle of everything here. All right, so I have this list. This is my universe list. These stocks here, there's about 360 of them. They pass my fundamentally based screens. That's step one. The next thing that I do to get to the sector leaders is I'm going to go through this whole list here. I'm going to see which ones are in the top 20 industry groups. I automatically take those and I put them over to my sector leaders. Then after that, I come back over to the universe list and I look at this column here. And I've got this column that just tells me the group rank change week to week. So if something is in a rapidly improving group, I want to be tuned into that. The reason why, I'm not sure if, when you started to watch, but the reason why is because if a stock is in a rapidly improving industry group, then that's putting the wind at the back of that group. So, for example, let's see if we could scroll down here a little bit. All right, so like this group in here, the software group, jumped 13 spots from last week to this week. So in my mind, that's something that I want to pay attention to. It doesn't mean that these stocks are necessarily setting up or ready to buy or anything like that, but it's something that I at least want to start paying attention to. So I'll take all the stocks like that and I'll put them on the special sector leaders list. Then after that, I export this list, I put it over into TradingView, and then manually, one at a time, what I'm going to do is click the right thing and then go through each one of these stocks and see, did it make a higher high on the week? Or did the relative strength line push into new high ground? Because that's showing me leadership quality. If the stock is making new highs, then at least for that week, it's showing leadership, right? But how? Price performance. If the relative strength line is pushing into new highs, that's showing me that it's the leadership, right? Because it's outperforming the index. So every time that it does that, I flag it manually. And in doing so, I know right away which ones are the leaders. Sometimes the leaders are setting up, oftentimes they're not. When they do set up, I'm ready. And I'm sitting there, waiting, watching, listening. The moment that they're ready, pounce, and then get into them. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But when they work, you could see that, well, this one worked out pretty well. Getting close to a 50% gain on NVIDIA. So, Elad, does that answer your question? I hope so. Any other questions? You're welcome. Any other questions before we head out? Again, for anybody that's not on the Marrow Wealth newsletter, make sure that you get on the newsletter, marrowwealth.com/newsletter. Also, make sure that you like and subscribe wherever you happen to be watching this show. What else? What else can I tell you? Oh, yeah. Earlier, If you want all that stuff done for you, I posted a link into the chat where you could take a 2-week free trial of the Mara Elite Research service. So go check that out if you're interested. All right, and looks like that'll be it for today. So I want to say thank you all so much for being here with me. Appreciate it. We will be here again tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing our midweek update. So again, wherever you are watching this from, make sure that you follow and you will see all this cool stuff that we've got in store for you guys. Until then, take care. Much love. God bless. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around to the end. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button down below and become a part of the Mara Wealth community. And make sure that you check out some of the other videos on the channel. They're exactly what you need to see. And leave a comment down below. I read all of them. Leave a comment.